Alright everybody, and welcome back to Focus Tree Discussion, where in today's episode we'll be going over the United States of America. Now, the United States tree and I have a very love-hate relationship. The tree that it received back in Man the Guns has a lot of good aspects to it. I quite enjoy what I do with the tree. I think the biggest problem is that it's not very versatile. Like, there's a few runs you can do, and that's about it, because there's just not a lot of diversity in the tree. There is, on paper, differences, but realistically, a lot of it you can do in one or two playthroughs, and that's about all you want to do with this tree, which I think for the United States is kind of sad. Like, the US realistically doesn't have a lot of differences it can do, which kind of makes it boring, because the US is just so powerful in the game that it lets you brute force your way through a lot of things that if giving it more options, I think would really take advantage of. Because the thing with, like, such as with the new DLC and the scientists and the special projects, the U.S. has all kinds of scientists. It has all kinds of abilities to build up facilities, to hire more scientists, to get breakthroughs. You can get so much of the research techs with the experimental facilities. It's crazy. Like, you can get all of these. I recently did a run trying to get one of the achievements where you have to get, like, the land cruiser, the intercontinental ballistic missiles, and the I think it's modern battleship. I did that as the U.S., and it's very fun because the U.S. can get very tech heavy, but the problem is I think it's just its politics are very narrow in scope, which is interesting considering the U.S. has a whole politics little mini game in its decisions menu. It feels very underutilized for the United States. And I hope Paradox will go back and change that soon. It doesn't need it as soon as, say, something like Japan and such, but I would really like the U.S. to have a touch-up, because the U.S. is a major player, and it not having as much content as it should can really hurt the game. Alright, to start out with, I'd like to go over the national spirits that the U.S. has. So first off, it has Home of the Free, the Great Depression, Monroe Doctrine Enforcer, and the London Naval Treaty Signatory. Now, the thing with this is that two of these national spirits really don't have much of an effect, because the London Naval Treaty Signature, it limits how big of a kind of ship you can have. The problem is this gets aborted pretty early on, and while I'm not a Navy player, realistically, I think you can make pretty decent designs up until the naval treaties are aborted that you can fit under these requirements and make a very nice navy. So, like, it doesn't really feel all that limiting. It can, because you can't build that many ships before the UK kind of gets weird about it. But realistically, like, it doesn't have as much of an effect. It's just kind of there. Same with, like, the Monroe Doctrine Enforcer. On A history, it can actually have some stuff to do, because, like, there's Operation Bolivar, and some of these nations are trying to join the act. Like, it can do stuff, but realistically, in a regular playthrough, this isn't going to come into play all that much. If you're playing historically, like single player historically, or even multiplayer historically, it's just not really going to come into play. We have the Home of the Free, which pretty much just lets it create factions, but it can't join factions of a different ideology and some ideological drift defense. It's just there to keep the U.S. from joining other kinds of factions, and to keep it kind of moving where it'll join the Allies, and it's kind of there to keep the AI on the rails, so it's not that big of a deal that it's there. And then finally, the Great Depression, which, while it is a very serious penalty with the political power, the efficiency gain, the population factor, consumer goods, and the faction tension limit, well, the political power really is the only thing that really hurts the U.S. early game. You have so many civilian factories that it doesn't really matter. I mean, you are restricted here with undisturbed isolation, which also compounds that problem. But the U.S. can just brute force its way through that, and you can realistically get rid of it, at least mitigate it, very quickly. I feel like this should be, you can incrementally fix it with these focuses, like the Agricultural Adjustment Act, Fair Labor Standards, federal housing, which I think is good that you have to incrementally fix it. I just think that the problem is that it's not super intuitive. It's do focus, wait until you can do next focus, and so on and so forth. There's not like, yes, you do need to have certain amount of centers, but realistically, you just click medium, lobby at effort between every focus, and you're good. You're gonna have the support you need to get past all these. And one of the biggest problems is the U.S. doesn't really have a lot of different focuses it can do that you really want to do instead of these. Like, it's pretty much bum rush, fix the Great Depression, and then do other things in between. Unless you're doing certain kind of playthroughs, that's pretty much how the US goes. So I think maybe adding a couple more different spirits that are also bad, maybe not as bad, but also need to go down different trees or do different things to get rid of. Because it's really easy just to bum rush, get ready to go through that, and then do other stuff on the side, and then go back. Like, you don't really have to spread yourself doing multiple different things across multiple different focus trees. It makes the US very straightforward, which, while that is a good thing, I don't mind it being straightforward. I just think that it needs you to have to make choices on what kind of focuses you want to do. Because right now it's pretty much, like I said, go through here, get your research slot. You can do Neutrality Act, get the Arsenal of Democracy. Once you get your war support up, you do these. You get your more research, and then you go over here, you increase your Navy if you're doing Navy, or you go through and you do your air focuses or your Army in between fixing the Great Depression. It's very straightforward, and it could just use a little bit more decision making, in my opinion. Moving on, we'll start talking about the actual focus tree. I want to start with the War Plan Division section, then we'll move over to the military section, and we'll close out with the politics section. Alright, getting into the War Plan Division section, it is split into 3 different sections: intervention in Asia, in Europe, and the Americas. We'll start out with Asia, as it's the smallest and most straightforward. The first focus, you get a general. As the US, you don't really need a general. You have plenty, and plenty of them are good or can become good. So, like, for 70 days, it's kind of weak. The only reason it's not as horrible as in some other trees with a lot of 70 days focus like that is because the US doesn't have a lot that it needs to do, which is one of my complaints. So if it gets more content, that would have to be shortened for sure. Then you have the choice between War Plan Orange and Yellow. You can actually do both, but realistically you're going to want to do one or the other, which give you bonuses against Japan and its puppets or China and its warlords. Where with the Japan one, you get extra shorter naval invasion time and better invasion speed. And then it leads down to Defenders of the Pacific, which is another horrible focus, which just gives a bunch of forts for 70 days. And you have to go through a 70-day focus for a general, and then 2 70-day focuses, one of which you probably won't use, because usually you don't fight both these at the same time. You usually are fighting one or the other. Almost always it's Japan, but you could theoretically be at war with China. So, like, this feels very, like, this bonus, the War Plan Orange, is very nice, and I like it. I like the system in general of the war plans, but just a lot of these focuses, they don't have a purpose to do. Like, these 3, I wouldn't want to do at all. You just have to do this one because of to get to War Plan Orange, but the other 2 are completely worthless, except for this one in niche situations, and I would never do this focus. Moving over to the intervention in Europe, I guess I should probably talk about the War Plan Division on its own. It gives you a planning speed Chief of Army. You don't really need that because as the US, you have 3 others. One which is attack, a drill, and then a morale. Like, planning speed is alright, but I wouldn't say it's better than offense for sure, but it would be in competition with these 2. But you have offense, that makes it completely irrelevant. So again, another kind of irrelevant focus. Moving over to Intervention in Europe, which gives you a daily command power multiplication gain and a new operative. Before the Goddardammerung DLC, I would say this wasn't as good, but now with you to do raids and such with your command power, it is something. It lets you do raids a lot faster, so that is appreciated. Then moving over, you have all the war plans for Europe. You got Plan Silver against Italy, you got Plan Gold against France, Plan Black against Germany, Plan White against the Soviets, Plan Red against the United Kingdom, as well as Ruby and Scarlet Garnet for the Raj and for uh, Australia, which I like. That's all cool. Most of these won't be used except for silver and black. I'm not sure if gold works on Vichy. If it is, it could be used, but if not, it's not as good. They did in a war effort patch come through and give all of these well, not all of them, but a lot of them a new operative. So as the US, you can get operatives for the specific countries you want to fight, and then get the multipliers. Like for Italy, you can get a Italian operative with like an Italian nationality, and then an attack bonus against Italy. That's pretty decent. I like that. Again, I like this entire system. I just think a lot of it isn't super needed. It's cool for all history, but we'll get into the problem is the tree doesn't let you really take advantage of this. Starting with back over to Warplan Black, this gives you your boast against Germany. It also gives you Destroyer for bases, which gives you control of a lot of like the Caribbean and like the Caribbean, Bahamas, Jamaica, Bermuda, and Newfoundland. So you get those control of those territories and you give like the British and the Canadians destroyers. So it's an alright focus to get a few islands. It's not the biggest deal, but it is interesting. The only problem is like the United Kingdom has to be democratic, at war, and at peace with you. So like it's not like any deviation from history and you can't really do it, but it's historic and it's cool that it's there. Moving over to Warplan White, you get a war going against the Soviet Union, and then you get anti-Bolshevik aid, which lets you send guns to all of the countries that war with the Soviet Union. I like this. This is a little bit of a Cold War Operation Unthinkable such. It lets you have a little bit of that at the end. You defeat Germany, and then you can continue the push into the Soviets and fund other people who are fighting them. I like it. It's interesting. I'm not sure with Warplan Gold if this works on Vichy. If it does, that's great. You can use it for Operation Torch and such. It also gives you a operative, which would have the French nationality, which you could use in Vichy. So it's all right. I wouldn't say it's great, but it is there, and I like that it's there. Moving over to Warplan Red, this gives you a your boost against United Kingdom, but also gives you spotting speed, which is good to fighting the British Navy. Then you get your boost against Australia, New Zealand, and British Raj. So your Pacific theater fighting the United Kingdom. That's cool. I haven't really used a lot of these. I've used, I believe, Warplan Silver and Black before, like playing historical United States. But I like that this is here for Operation Unthinkable, and like if a breakdown between the United States and the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom on its alt histories, all three of them get war goals on the United States, so this is interesting to have. I like that. I think there'd be a little bit more if you could just a little bit more to them, because right now they're just 70 days. They give great attack bonuses, but they're just not real. Like a lot of them are just not really like I'd like more stuff like this, the anti-Bolshevik aid, like Destroyer for bases, just a bit more of that kind of stuff to make these really pop out. Now we move over to the intervention of the Americas, which I think has the most interesting part of this little focus tree. You got your Warplan Crimson, which lets you get your Warplan against the Canada. Also gets you fort construction speed, which is pretty nice. I wouldn't really use that if you're invading Canada, but it is nice for securing up key points. The problem is you're the U.S. You have a massive industry. It's not super important. Then you got your Warplan Green, which gets you your attack against Mexico. And then infrastructure speed, which is pretty cool. Let you while you're invading Mexico, you can build up the infrastructure on the territories you can conquer, and I think that's kind of cool. I wish some of these other war plans would have other boosts like this, where like land forward and infrastructure. Those are both very good. Starting with the intervention in the Americas, you get planning speed. It's an all right little spirit. I would like a little bit better, or maybe make it a 35-day, but it's all right. But then we get to the interesting parts, which is Warplan Gray, which gets you naval invasion, prep speed, and space. This is pretty much to invade all of South America. And then you got the Hemisphere Defense, which lets you make a faction. But it doesn't really show it, but if you complete these focuses down to reaffirm the Monroe Doctrine, I believe it is, you get... No, is it under Warplan Gray, and after some of these... You get the focus. Maybe if I let it run. There we go. It invites everyone. It invites everyone to your faction who's democratic in the Americas. So you get, if you do it early in the game, you can get Brazil before they flip to non-aligned and such. You get a lot of the Central and South American countries. It also, down here, will give you enforce the Monroe Doctrine. If you have enough senator support and representative support, as well as 25 war support, you get a war you get for 50 political power, and after 35 days, you get a puppet war goal against every non-aligned fascist and communist South Central American nation. So this is actually a very interesting path, especially with like the War Plan Gray. You can naval invade Peru, go on Venezuela, Argentina. This actually is quite powerful. I've never done this run. I think I might plan on doing one soon, just to see how fun it is to kind of just ignore the rest of the world until Japan, and then just focus on building up a faction in South America, liberating these other countries as democracies and such. I think it's a cool little LARP path. I like it, and this isn't tied to any political branch, so you can do this any way you want with this tree. Like if you want to go communist, or probably wouldn't be as fun with the fascist path because it's more about conquering, but you could do so. Very interesting. I like that this is here as it is. I just wish, again, more diversity in this tree to take advantage of something like this. Alright, next is the Army tree, which is split into 4 different sections. You got your Army, you got your Air Force, your Navy, and then a little Pentagon Department of Defense section. So starting out, you get the War Department, which gives you Mech's command power plus 20. Again, with the rework to the command power system with raids, with the U.S., you can actually is a country that's well suited to doing that. It's not as bad as it used to be. Then we'll start out with the Pentagon because it's small. You got to build Pentagon. You get 10% planning speed, which you can stack with intervention in the Americas with even more planning speed. It's not the best, but it is. I mean, plus 15% planning speed is something. Then you got Department of Defense, which gives you more command power, a maximum command power, and daily command power gain. So again, works very well with stacking a lot of raids. So before I would have said these trees are very useless, never do them. Now if you're focusing more on a raid kind of US strategy, they actually have some value. Moving over to the Army tree. The Army tree starts out with the Selective Service, or the Selective Training Act, which lets you flip from disarmed nation to limited conscription, as long as you have enough support, and it will lower your support in the House. Now, this isn't so bad because, again, I said earlier, you can just lobby for support between every single focus, and it gets you a good majority. And then whenever you get a little event to build a specific type of factory in a state, you just do that. It's not really that hard to keep it up. It does suck because you do spend a lot of political power on it, but it's not the biggest deal. Continuing on, we have it's split into it splits into 2 real sections with a focus off to the side. This one is a boost for your paratroopers, and you get a little bit of air experience. It's not terrible, but just I would like the increase of army experience maybe up to 25, or maybe just make it a 35-day focus, because the boost for paratroopers isn't bad. It's just it's not crazy good. That makes me want to do it. But if you're going more of a paratrooper US strat, it is nice to have because you can also use it for your engineers, your recon. Like, it is a very versatile focus, so it's not terrible. Moving down, you have the Louisiana maneuvers, 20 army experience, 50% reduction for land doctrine, pretty decent. Could be a bit better, but it's not the worst. Then you got the United States Army of the United States, which gets you mobilization speed. It's not terrible. I just don't really see the point doing it because the U.S. already has a army of 350,000 manpower, and then another 250 in the bank, and then doing the selected you'll get limited conscription, which will give you a 1.5% from here. You can do this as like your second or third focus. Like usually, what people like, you can do. Continue the New Deal, and then maybe do WPA, and then you do if you don't have enough support, you do this, or like you're doing it very early in the game, so like by the time you need the manpower, it'll have already mobilized. So it's not terrible. It's just I don't see the purpose of using it. Same here with the Women's Armed Service Integration Act. It's very good, 2% recruitable. Problem is, you're the United States of America. You don't really need manpower, especially by the time you get down to here. You're probably unlimited. You can always get up to extensive eventually. Like it's a good focus. It's just I don't really see ever using it because you don't need that much manpower if you're playing the game efficiently. Like unless you're throwing away millions of lives worthlessly by just battle planning like the Soviets or the Germans, you don't really need it. Over here we got airborne divisions. Now this has been upgraded since the Arms Against Tyranny DLC because it gives you Special Forces cap multiplier, which Special Forces has been improved massively. You get a free branch specialization as well as 25% cost reductions for Special Forces. This is a very nice focus because as a major, you're one of the few nations that can actually use all three Special Force doctrine trees. So you could have one for paratroopers, marines, and mountaineers. Now as the US, that's very nice because like Rangers, I believe you can get here, are very nice as a support company. If you're the US, you're going to be doing a lot of naval invasions, and then paratroopers you can also use. Like it's awesome that you can get all three in this tree with this focus, and it's very easy to get to because the only focus that you wouldn't really care to do as much is Louisiana maneuvers. So it's very easy to get, and it's very strong, and I like that. Moving over here, we have Support Rock Island, two research bonuses for 100% for support artillery or support technology. Pretty good. I like that. You got Tank Experiments. Now it gives a 50% land warfare breakthrough, as well as one research 100% for armor. Before, I would have the Goddardammerung DLC. I would have said this is honestly not that great of a focus. It's not horrible, but for 70 days it wasn't good. But now with the land warfare breakthrough, it's pretty okay. You can use that to get through your tanks and start getting like a flame tank or a super heavy howitzer. Pretty nice. Moving down, you get a decision between tank destroyers and main battle tanks, which gives you a different MIO for one, which is for obviously tank destroyers, and then your regular one for tanks, which have been shortened down to 35 days, which is very nice. It also gives you two sides to the MIOs. The one detriment is that you have to pick between them, but really, because the U.S. has the industrial capability to do whatever it wants, so having decisions like this isn't as cool. Like for a minor power, this would be really good, but for the U.S., it's not terrible. It's just it is what it is. And then moving down, you get 2 research speeds for truck, which work for mechanized, so you can get very good mechanized. If this was just 1 research bonus, I'd say that's not very good, but for 2, you can actually get very good mechanized tech by just research, because you already have the regular version of truck, so you can get early mechanized 1 and 2, along with the tank research. You can get very good tank divisions as the U.S. that way, so I really do like that. So overall, the Army tree I think is very nice. Alright, moving on to the air section, we start out with the Air Warplans Division, which is a great focus that gives 25 air experience, 50% reductions for air doctrine, and 10% reduction for fighters and heavy fighters, which is just, it's fantastic. Now this is a major power focus. Then it goes down and the tree splits into 2. There's the air support versus the strategic bombing. Air support's pretty much CAS and TAC bombers versus strategic bombers. Starting with strat bombers, you get a strat bomber reduction cost of 10 and then 25 air experience. Also great if you're going for strat bombers. Then you get this focus that gives you a 300% research bonus for heavy fighters. This hasn't been updated with the new system, but it should give a heavy plane model research speed, which for 300% you can get very early heavy fighters. So it is an option. I don't usually do it, but it's there and I like it. Then you have combined bomber offensive, where if you're at war with a major power, and I believe you just have to be at war with a great power, you get another boost to heavy aircraft, and you get a 10% range, which is very good. I also believe you can use this to also get a heavy, like a large airframe boost, or maybe that's a medium airframe, I'm not sure. But 10% strat bomber range with the new special projects that can get you crazy range bombers. This is great. Then you have the United States Air Force, which gets you 10% air doctrine cost. Hard speaking. This is a good focus. I just think it comes very late because this one you're locked. You have to be at war with a great power to get, and then you have to do this. Like you're probably gonna have your air doctrine already pretty done. So I kind of would like them to maybe flip these. Would be great, but besides that, it is a good focus. Moving over to the air sport, you got you get a air sport spirit, which gets you minus 10% cost on CAS and TAC bombers and 25 air experience. That's great. You have this, which gets you a research speed for CAS models, which would now just be a regular model. So even faster, like you can create great planes. Then you have a TAC bomber model, which I think also would, this probably gives you a medium aircraft research speed. I'm not sure. And then you have this focus, which gets you air reduction costs for your air doctrine. Also good. So depending on what way you want to go, both sides are very good. And it just depends on your playstyle, which I think is great because the U.S., you can afford to go to TAC bombers and CAS or strat bombers. So having them be this strong, it's very great. Moving over to the Navy section. Starting out with the 2 Ocean Navy Act, which gets you 10 dockyards, which is crazy. The U.S. already starts out with 22 dockyards. You pretty much get to add an extra 50% right off the top. You have more dockyards than many countries have factories. You do need to have enough support and control California and New York, but that's not hard. Moving over, you have the Maritime Commission, 10% dockyard construction speed, so you can ramp up those dockyards if you want to do a naval game. That's crazy. And then Liberty ships, which give you cheaper convoys and faster invasion speed. Just great focuses all around. Moving over to the Bureau of Ships, this lets you get 5% off pretty much every type of ship you'd want to build, plus 50 naval experience. It also removes Bureau of Ordnance, which gets like a negative malice to your torpedoes. But consider how early it is. If you're doing a naval game, you're going to have this before you're at pretty much any war that it would with any major power that has a navy. So like that doesn't even matter. So like this is just great. Then you have your escort effort, which gets you cheaper light hulls. Then you got convoy defense, which gets you boosts for your doctrines. The only problem is like naval experience is really easy to get, so like you can max out your doctrines really easily. But it's good that it's there. Then you have fleet submarine. This now gives you two. This gives you 2 boosts for submarine models, and a 10% reduction in producing them, and 10% submarine research speed 100%. That's crazy. Plus naval engineering. This is just a crazy focus for subs now. Then you got unrestricted submarine warfare, which gives you 10% surface detection and 10% less sub visibility. This is just great for subs. Then you have your decision between carrier or battleship. Now, battleship gives you some naval engineering progress for special projects and 200% battleship research models. Really good if you're going to do battleships. This one's not so good. Again, naval experience is really easy to get, so like getting a 50% reduction for base strike isn't that great. And then advanced basing. I hate 7-day focuses that give naval bases. This is 4 naval bases in Guam, 2 in Guam and 2 in Manila. That's not terrible because like that lets you have more supply and host more ships and all that. But it's 70 days. That's awful. Why would you ever do this? You can build those faster and do other focuses. Like this naval tree has really good focuses that you would much rather do. And moving over to the carrier, you get 200% for the carrier models and 25% naval engineering. It's basically the same thing, but for carriers. But then you get the Bureau of Aeronautics, which gets you boosts for naval bombers, which now, with all of these, they really need to go through and fix that with the By Blood Alone DLC versions. But so far they haven't, so I don't think they will. They did go through and fix with like a lot of with this DLC, last DLC giving the naval engineering and all that, but they didn't fix this, so I don't think that's going to get fixed for a while. And then you get Naval Radar, which gives you more naval engineering and avionics, 50% plus a boost for radar. This is really good for getting your radar built up. Like, it's very nice. And then finally, you have the Fund the Navy. This is 50% reductions for your naval doctrine. That's why I don't really care for, like, this one. It is literally 3 times weaker than this focus and takes you 3 times longer to get to. It's crazy. Why is this so weak compared to something like this? Then you have expand the U.S. EMC with the Marine Corps, which gets you more reductions for special forces. You tie that in with the airborne boost. Like, it's great. And then you get this, which 2 boosts for transport models, which lets you get this tab, which will let you get very fast research speed to get for the your landing craft, so you can just do massive D-days and Operation Overlord and such. Like, it's just, this is overall a very strong tree. Besides the battleship is the only section I think that needs to be ripped. I think everything else is perfectly fine. Same with, like, this tree. This tree I think is very good. Just maybe flip these 2 focuses. Maybe flip these 2 focuses, because, like, these actually probably could say the same. They're not so bad. Then over here, maybe give an incentive to go down these 2. But overall, I think pretty much this whole military tree, very top notch, very great for a major power. Could they always add a bit more to it? Sure, but I think for what we have, 90% of it's perfectly well done, and I'm glad that they at least gave the U.S. a very good mill tree. Next, we'll move on to the politics, which I will have a lot more to say and complain about. I'll see you in the next section. Alright, and now the important part, the politics. So the political tree of the United States, I'm of 2 minds with this one. Some parts I very much enjoy about it, and other parts I really hate about it. So we'll start out with the 2 Democratic paths, the historic and the ahistoric. So, going with the Neutrality Act, it's the historic path. You need to have a certain amount of representation, but when you do it, you get the Neutrality Act, which pretty much makes it harder to join factions and all that kind of stuff. But it gives more support to your the House and Senate. It also gives you 2% political power, but loses 5% war support. Overall, not a bad focus. You can do it pretty early on, and that 200 political power for the U.S. is very good. The only real downside it gives is it makes getting the Lend-Lease Act a lot harder. But realistically, it's just lobby and support. It's not that hard, and considering this gives you 200 political power, you can spend the political power lobby. You can spend the minus 0.75 for the medium lobbying effort to get enough support so you can do it. So realistically, there is no real drawback to it. Arsenal of Democracy is an amazing focus, giving 6 military factories, 6 dockyards, which is crazy. Then you get 10 air experience, 50 Army, 50 Navy. I really wish it gave 50 air experience as well, but overall, it's a really good focus, and its only real requirement is that you have 95% for the Democratic Party, which we'll get into that a little bit later on how that can be affected, but overall, not bad. Then we have down here, military construction, which you need 30% war support, which you lose 5 here, and you start out with 5, so you're pretty much going to be at 0. So you're going to have to be doing the war propagandas and military films and all that to boost up. But it gives you 10 Army experience, which is good, 5 military factories on top of the 6 you just got, and tons of infrastructure all over the place, which, well, as the U.S., you're probably going to build a lot of infrastructure early on because you're on undisturbed isolation. Still, that's a lot of infrastructure. It's a very strong focus. Then you have the USACE projects, which again, you need 30% war support and be at war. Oh, you do need to be at war for this, so this is a much later. So getting 30% war support while you're at war, you will be in a defensive war with Japan in 1941. So it shouldn't be so hard when you actually get access to this part of the tree. And then here you get even more military experience and 3 more factories. Just overall a good focus, nothing to complain about. Moving over, we have the Giant Awakes, which you need to be at war and have 30% war support and 25% for the Democratic Party, and it flips you from undisturbed isolation, which is awful, over to civilian economy, which isn't that good, but if you have political power saved up and you have the war support, you can flip over to war economy or at least partial MOB. So gets rid of one of the biggest downsides the U.S. has, which is being stuck on undisturbed isolation. So overall, good focus. Then we have the wartime industry, which gives you civilian to military conversion costs. I don't ever really do that because having a lot of civilian factories that you build earlier in the game to build your mills, and then the trade for resources. Granted, the U.S. doesn't really need that, so it can afford to convert a lot of civs. I just don't really see the use of it. It also gives you a design company, which gets you industrial research speed and factory output. General Motors, pretty cool. Because your other ones are like you have much less industrial and then more synthetic, and then this is electrical, so you can flip over to industrial. The problem is that you have to be at war, so this is like a 1941 focus, so unlocking that design company so late really doesn't matter because you're already pretty much done with because you've already researched very far into your industry. Like, it's 1941, you've probably already got these done, so it'll only affect the final level. And 5% output as the US in 1941, 1942 doesn't really matter. So realistically, I don't think this is that good of a focus. This maybe make it a 35-day focus or add more to it, because like these focuses are very strong, but in this one just kind of doesn't need, and it's so late in the game it doesn't really matter, but it's alright. It's not the biggest deal. And then for the joint between the Limited and Neutrality Act is you get another research slot, always good as the US, and the Manhattan Project, which gets you nuclear research breakthrough progress, like a 50% boost to researching nukes, research like for special projects, and then research special projects speed 5%. Very good. This helps the US get nukes very early, like not very early, but like earlier than other countries can do, and it pairs well with the US having a lot of nuclear scientists such as Oppenheimer and the ability to build facilities. It's just a very good focus for the US. Now moving over to limited intervention, this one requires you to have more representatives than the other because you have to pass this, and it gives you limited intervention, which it reduces your joint faction tension, your guarantee, and your send volunteers limits, so you can send volunteers actually. But in return, it makes your conscription and economy laws twice as expensive. It also gives you 20% debuff to your stability and removes some support from the House and Senate. That's not so bad, but the stability hit, very bad, but granted the US has very high stability, so that's not so bad, and it allows you to actually do stuff. Then it gets you war propaganda, which gets you 10% war support, which as the US you'll need. So that's very good, but it will again hurt your representatives, but that's not so bad. And then you get a choice between focusing on Europe and focusing on Asia, which gets you allow the request Congress for military actions and such. It's interesting. I've not really done this because I feel like the Arsenal of Democracy Path is strong enough, and I've actually been able to join the Allies by rushing down stuff. I've joined before France fell. I wasn't able to get troops over before, but if I optimized it a little bit better, you can probably save France from falling, especially now with the new... I haven't done this with the new update, but France probably can hold out long enough so you can join the Allies even while doing the Neutrality Act. So I think the limited intervention needs to be buffed a little bit more because boost your spies, spotting speed of 20%, strengthen resistance and infiltration effect. Like, these are alright, but realistically the only difference is that you can get into the wars earlier, but as the US, you can overcome that because this tree's not as flushed out as it really should be. Then there's the final part that I want to talk about for the democracy tree, which is that there's two ways to deal with the Great Depression. There is continuing the New Deal, which gets you political power, and you can do right away, which leads into the WPA, agricultural adjustment, fair labor, federal housing. It also gets you a research and a boost for rubber processing. Or you can wait until November for the election, choose the Republicans, and then go down the Adjustment Compensation Act, Labor Management Relations, Protectionist Tariffs, Income Reform, and institute for another research slot, which are both part of the historical and ahistorical democracy trees. Now, with the Roosevelt one, you get 300 political power, which as the US, you have no political power, so tie that in with the Neutrality Act. This is how you're getting your political power early on. Then you also get a start on recovering from the Great Depression, where once you've lobbied for a little bit of support, you can turn the depression into a slow recovery. Then it'll take a decent amount of time before you can do the next focus. I'm not sure off the top of my head how long, but it is a focus or two in between them. And slowly you just increase how you decrease the penalties of the Great Depression, which is pretty good. And then you also get a research slot and a boost to synthetics. Overall, a decent tree. With the Alf Landon Republican path, you get pretty much the same thing, where you get slightly different. Like this gets you proficiency, production efficiency cap, and I believe it's like you get export focus, and then you get, it's fixing the Great Depression in a similar way. It's just not, it's a little bit slower because you can't do this until the election, and it does a little bit different, but overall it's pretty much the same, which is cool. Now the problem that now moving over to the next is the problem with the alt history trees, that realistically I like it, but I also hate it, is that you can actually do a lot of the ahistorical stuff over here and over here while staying with the democratic tree, because the only requirement for the War Powers Act, which leads to this whole expansionist tree, is that you need enough support, which isn't hard, and you need more than 30% support for the Silver Legion, which is the fascist party. And doing this focus gets you 5% fascism and a advisor that gets you 0.10% fascism. You can hire him. After you reestablish the gold standard, you hire him. You sit until you get to 30. You do a War Powers Act, and pretty much everything else, like Seize Cuba requires war support, but not fascism. Neither does any other focus in this tree. So what you do is you get over 30%. You do this focus. You fire Charles from your government, and then you just start doing anti-fascist raids, maybe institute press censorship, and eventually you'll get back up to 90. And I think you can get a democratic reformer. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Yes, you can, as long as you're not a supervised state, which you shouldn't be. So you can easily get back over to 95% and still do Arsenal Democracy and these very powerful focuses, while also seizing Cuba and doing all this, which we'll discuss in a minute. And same on the flip side, you can suspend the persecution, which lets you get Earl, which lets you start boosting communism, which once you have enough, once you have 10%, you can do the armed forces deregulation, which is 2% recruitable. That's very nice, but not needed, but you can do it. Then you can reach out to the WARE group, which gets these 3 free advisors who are all very good. And then you can also do the USSR economic cooperation, and you can either do Unholy Alliance or Secure China, either way. And you can do the juicy focuses of end monarchism to get a focus on a war goal on the UK and Japan, and then Shatter the Empires, which gets you a war goal on Italy and France, pretty much everyone else who has an empire. And you can do this as democratic, the US, which the whole drawback of the US is that it's democratic, it can't justify war goals, which this lets you get around, because it pretty much gets you a war goal on any major power you want to fight, and once you're at war with a major power, world tension spikes up and a lot of other nations you can justify on, as long as they've committed a little bit of world tension. So that it pretty much gives you a very wide margin that you can do. You can also, if you join the Comintern, it used to be, they've patched it, but once there's a decision when the Soviets are being invaded by the Germans, that you can, once they hit a certain surrender limit, you can actually merge the two nations together and annex all of the Soviet Union. It used to be you would, if you didn't join the war, you could get all the land without having to fight Germany. Now you have to actually then beat Germany, but you can still annex the full Soviet Union, which is crazy. And again, I believe you can still do it as a democracy. I don't believe you need to be communist for them to let you in, as long as you increase relations and such. Like it's crazy. As a result of being able to do both the War Power Act and like end monarchism and such, I would say like the US's democracy parts are very limited because there's only a few focuses. But because you can gain access to these, there isn't really much I can say, because that kind of takes away the whole point of this tree being very small, and it makes it very fun because it removes the limitations that democracy has. So I don't really have that much complaints about like such as like the Neutrality Act, because you can always do this later after you've already done your conquering stuff, or you do it you can still do it before. Like the Neutrality Act doesn't stop you from declaring war or anything. So it pretty much bypasses all of the detriment that and the Neutrality Act and even like the limited intervention to a lesser extent have, that you're a democratic nation that doesn't have a very flushed out tree with a lot of stuff to do on the politics side. So it fixes that whole problem. So realistically, I don't have any complaints against the democracy pass, but as a result of them having access to this stuff, it makes me have very large complaints about the communist and the fascist pass, which we'll get into next, starting with the communist. So with both of the extreme ideologies, they both lead to a civil war in the United States, which civil wars automatically make paths a little bit weaker. Now, depending on what happens at the end of paths lets you determine if they're good or bad. Such as with the new rework to the Hungarian communistry, you have to go into a civil war for all of these. Well, I don't know if haven't done the democratic one. It looks like you can do a Danubian Federation. This one has some fun, like these have things you can do that make it worth a civil war. They might not be as good as other paths, but they have unique things. Like this tree, you can do the United Balkan Federation. That's something I don't believe you can do as any other path. So it's something unique. This lets you join with the Soviets, which gives you freedom to move. This lets you get access to the joint focus tree and do a democracy kind of thing, which join with the Allies. Like, there's different things that you can do with that civil war that at least make it where you don't immediately not want to do that path as a result. But the U.S., I don't believe there's really anything in these trees that makes me want to do them, because the end monarchism, shatter empires, unholy alliance, you can do that with the Neutrality Act. So these are not reasons to do that. You fix the Great Depression in the same way, pretty much. You can fix the Great Depression in the same way. You can. But this focus just takes away 10 stability, and you need to have enough. You have to have the communist advisor in government. You have to do it's a horrible focus that leads you to the Civil War. Why would you ever want to do this? Then you get back your stability that you lost in this focus, and then you lose support, and you have to have enough support to do it, which it's just these focuses. That's 140 days to pretty much put you further back than where you were. Accumulated wealth tax, which can give you minus 15% community goods, that's pretty good, and it starts recovering your economy, the depression. So you can ignore some of these and do this one instead of having to do all three of these. You can do like two of them. And I think you can do these quicker, but realistically you can do them quicker, but then you have to do a civil war, which kind of negates the whole point. Like 15% consumer good factor isn't enough to make me want to do a civil war. Then you get 10% war support. Cool. That's great. But again, civil war. Here, you got to fix your Great Depression. You already can fix the Depression without that. Militia Organization Act. Minus 10% training time for 70 days, and you lose support. Great. It's a horrible focus. And you have to do it to continue on. That's another problem, is you have to be taking these focuses to move down. Then you got the Communal Property Act. You get to fix more of your economy. Great. But again, and you get some building slots, and you can unlock communal domain, which we'll see what that does, because I've not really done the communist path. We'll see if that's worth anything. Then you get reintegration, which you can reintegrate. Cool. Then over here you get desegregation, which again, you can still get this without doing this tree. Then full desegregation. You need 20% communism support. It will put you in the Civil War, towards Civil War, and you get you 20% recruitable factor. If you're getting 2% here, and you can get 2% from the regular military tree, you can get up to limited. Well, you can get 2% from here. That's 4% on top of the 5% you can get with extensive. So that's 9%. You don't need the 20% recruitable factor. It's getting you some more of something you don't really need at the cost of putting you into a civil war. Then democratic socialism. It gets you more communism, which is alright, because you're going communist, but again, 70 days, I don't care for. Then you liberate the Philippines, which, well, that means that Japan won't declare war on you, so that's something, but you could always annex it too. well, that's a lot more expensive. Really, getting rid of the Philippines isn't that, like, you want to go to war with Japan anyway, and you probably are already kill them before they go to war. If you're going to do this focus tree, you're going to go to war with them early. Well, actually, you're going to be just weaker. It's like it kind of ruins these two things because you can go into a civil war. Like, these are good focuses on the democratic path because you're strong. In this path, you're just weakening yourself and then want to fight all the majors. Like, it's not, that's not great design. Then you get a focus on the Dutch East Indies and a war goal against Australia. I mean, that's not horrible, but again, like, this tree is just, it has some okay things, but none of this makes up for the fact that you have to go into a civil war. Like, it's cool for like LARP purposes, but like, I don't want to do any of these focuses. Like, because the only thing, I'm not even sure for a fact if you can fix the Great Depression faster this way. It's like, and the only thing you get is the communal domain decisions, which I guarantee are not worth doing. Moving over to the fascist tree the United States has, it has most of the same problems that the communist has, except for it also is quite a bit slower because you have to wait till November to reestablish the gold standard. Then you can do America First and then start getting enough support to move on to the specific fascist parts right here. And the problem with this is that it's not as strong as doing the regular path. Like, because again, all of the war power stuff can be done by the democracy path, and pretty much the only thing you get is the honor Confederacy decisions, which aren't really that good, because pretty much all of this is to deal with the Civil War. Pretty much every single focus, except for this, is Civil War dealing with. Like this, like, you can improve your economy slightly during this, like with improving, because you can do these as democracy, but they're not as good as these just because you can do these quicker. But pretty much you can skip some of these and get some on your way on this tree, so it can be quicker. But the problem is that you're going to want to do most of them anyway to get down in the research slots, so maybe you can bypass. If you remove the Great Depression, I believe you can probably skip one of these focuses, because this one pretty much does the same thing as this. So if you do this, you wouldn't need to do this because it would already be removed, so you can skip a focus. The problem is then you have to go through all of these focuses to get to that, so like, it defeats the whole point of doing it, because while you are working towards your political aspect and doing this, you don't have it ultimately leads to something that's not worth doing it anyway, so you might as well just do it the other way in the first place. Now, something interesting this side does have is the Voter Registration Act that lets you be able to pretty much turn off the Congress system, that's interesting, but the problem is it's not very hard to manage. And and by the time you get all the way down here, you are probably very strong in the Senate and the House and can have passed all of the stuff you needed to pass. So having it at the end of the tree really doesn't have a great benefit. And you can do it as democratic, you just, because this one actually will move you closer to civil war, so no, you can't. It's the only one down here that you can't. But it makes no sense why it's all the way down here, because you need to do all of these focuses to get to it, and all of these are the ones that require the senators and stuff and such. Because like, once you get down to here, you don't need that. You don't need the Senate or the House. You don't need it for here. You just need fascist support for here. Like, none of these require it. Once this is the last one that requires it, and if you're doing the fascist path, you probably don't need to do that focus anyway because you're doing this focus. So it literally is worthless. Then we move over to actually looking in the specific tree. You have the national prosperity, 5% stability for 70 days. That's not good. You're crashing your stability anyway with this, and you're going to go into a civil war. It's worthless. This gets you some building slots and infrastructure speed. While not terrible, you're the U.S., and you've probably already built most of the infrastructure you need, because you have to wait till November, then do America First, wait till you get 10%, then wait till you get 20%, and then you can finally get down here. Like, it takes you so long to get here that you don't need the infrastructure boost. If this was like a military factory boost, maybe we're talking, but it's not. Deregulate the banking sector. This is where you get your military and civilian construction speed. That's not bad. But again, you're ripping yourself apart for 10%. That's what you get. You don't need that. You're the US. Like, then you get to, this does get you 10% efficiency growth. So mixing these two together makes you, it actually is very strong. Which is good, but again, you're going into a civil war. This is what you want. This would be your benefits would be 10% infrastructure, 10% mill and civ, and 10% efficiency growth to go with a slow path that requires you to go into a civil war. Because this is inviting support, getting a air theorist, getting more states to join with you, getting divisions you can raise. Like, this is all Civil War stuff that you have to do. So this is 70, 140, 210, 280. Yeah, 280 days of just wasted focuses that you wouldn't have to do if you did it, if you just stayed democracy. And then at the end, you get your honor, the Confederacy. I mean, you can get MacArthur in charge, and like you can have some fun, so you can get some good leaders and stuff. And these decisions, like, but like, it's fun. I've done the thing, but like I did it once or twice, and I'm probably not doing it again unless they add new stuff to it, because there's realistically no purpose, because everything that's interesting is here, which you again can do over with this part. But this is the juicy part of the tree. You get the War Powers Act, which you need your 30% Civil Legion support, which isn't hard to get because this previous focus gets you it, and once you get it, you just start reducing it. Once you have the war support, you get a war goal on Cuba, which is cool. You get Manifest Destiny, cheaper war goal time, which as the U.S. would help out if you're regular Democratic. You get the Canadian Corridor, which lets you demand. It's these 3 states here, and I believe these 2 island states. It lets you connect Alaska and the U.S. together, which is pretty cool. You eliminate the southern threat, which pretty much, I think it forces Mexico into an alliance with you or makes them a puppet. I'm not sure, but I don't remember all that well, but it pretty much settles the Mexico stuff. Then you get Dominate North America, which pretty much demands everyone becomes your puppet in North America and Central America. Then you got Pacific Pacification, which you demand colonial holdings from the UK. Secure Asia, which demands pretty much all of these give you, like, you get demand Indochina, Dutch East Indies, Siam to become a puppet. Strategic, and you demand more territory. I believe this is in the Caribbean. Protect South America, you demand all of South America pretty much submit to you, or you get war goals. And then Global Hegemony, which gets you war goals on all the majors. Like, this is a great tree, and it is supposed to be the whole reason you do the Civil War, but again, you don't have to. We'll keep reiterating this point because it's very important. There's no reason to do these besides just kind of interesting playthrough one time, maybe. Like, it's not worth doing. And the argument could be that, oh, well, maybe lock these to those specific paths, but then that makes everything else worse. I think they need to have their own specific things that make you really want to do them instead. Such as maybe, like, because one thing is the U.S. can't get cores on anything besides Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii through this decision tab right here. That's it. The U.S. can't form any nations. It can't do anything. Now, like, the U.K., if it goes down its fascist or monarchist path, can do some stuff like it can install an American monarchy if it annexes it. If you can annex the U.S. and give all of it to Canada and make a North America Dominion. Like, there's cool stuff, and that gives cores on all of. It gives Canada cores on all the U.S., which is really cool. But the U.S. itself can't really core anything. So I think what would make it interesting is to give both the communist path and the U.S. and the Confederacy path specific things that they themselves could do, specific formables or ways to integrate cores and stuff. That would make it interesting. Such as, like, the one of the ideas proposed by the Confederates was, when they were losing the war, was the Golden Circle, which was like they were going to annex Cuba and like parts of the Yucatan and stuff and make this like Gulf of Mexico kind of nation state down here. So maybe giving the Confederates the ability to like integrate parts of the Caribbean and maybe parts of Mexico into them as cores would give it a reason to do it. Or maybe like with the communist ability to core a joint like kind of like Greater Hungary, where like it can core a lot of territory around it with the individual decisions, to have it do that, where like the U.S. can slowly core parts of territories of like Canada and Mexico, maybe. Like, give it something like that. That would give you a reason to do it, to integrate territories. Or maybe give them a decision, like, because the one thing this tree has that a lot of other this tree doesn't have, that a lot of other trees has, is that you can't influence other neighbors to join you in factions. Like, you don't create factions. You don't have a way to really interact besides war goals with other nations. Like, it'd be interesting, like, as a communist America, to force force all of South America to join you. I get, like, you can do that through the we talked about, like, the hemisphere defense and such, so you can do it that way, but like realistically there's nothing you don't do with that. Like, that would be more of a democratic playthrough kind of fun thing, because like as communist or fascist, you don't really want to form a giant mega faction like this. This is fun for a democracy because you can't really conquer other democracies, so you might as well ally them. Just like making something where like you can core areas or something like that would make this at least worthwhile. Or maybe making it a way where you can avoid the Civil War altogether if you play your cards right. Make it hard, because like with this focus work with the Bund gives you more states like Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. So pretty much this entire territory up here will stay with you, and then you get you'll get this section over here, like you'll get all down here usually, but then like this part will break away, and then the East Coast always breaks away, and then sometimes these like two areas right here can decide to stay or flip and kind of RNG. So maybe making it where like you can influence more, make it a more influence like decision kind of tab where you can gain more control of the House and Senate, gain more control, and then avert the Civil War. That honestly would fix a lot of the issues. Is mandatory civil wars kind of suck, so being able to possibly make it where you don't have to face it, or you can make it much weaker. Because that's like with like the Soviet Civil War, you can't like the Soviets, I believe, are a great example of it, where if you want to do the Civil War, it's very detrimental, it rips the nation apart, but you get some cool things to do that we'll talk about. Like Slavic commitments isn't really that interesting, but Pan-Slavism, Third Rome, like I don't really care for the fascist path all that much, but like the monarchist path is worth going through the Civil War for. These just aren't. So giving them specific things that I've already discussed would be just great for it. Formable nations, integrating cores, just things that or even possibly just weakening the side where maybe maybe they get half as many divisions if you play your cards right, so then you can easily conquer them. It would make the Civil War much less taxing on your nation, which would make it more interesting. Because right now it's pretty while you can influence it a little bit, being able to do more would make it much better, because then you would feel less effects, which would make it less of a detriment, and you wouldn't need as much added to it. So got a little rambly there, but you guys get the point. Like, the problem with the US is that like while it has differences, like it kind of pigeonholes you into one or two three different playthroughs: a historic playthrough, I guess technically four, a limited intervention playthrough, a democratic I guess it would be more like you let some socialists into the government to let you go for more anti-colonialism, or you go more of a right-wing interventionist aspect, but you still stay democratic. Like the U.S. just has the issue of there's not a lot of different variations in its playthroughs that you can do, which causes me not to play the U.S. a lot, because the U.S. is just so strong that playthroughs don't really go wrong. Like, if you play it decently well, you can pretty much do whatever you want, so you don't have to play them multiple times or mess around with different things to get stuff to work right. it's pretty much plug and chug. You just go right through once you've determined what you want to do. So I think the U.S. just having more things that it can do, or have more things it has to focus on and have to balance, because right now you pretty much rush down fixing the depression, and then you can do then you do everything else around that. Having the U.S. have to do multiple different things to fix itself, or worry about going down certain things here and do other things there, I think it would just give a lot more dynamics to the U.S. and give it more playability than it currently has, at least for me, because it needs a bit more to do, because you kind of just either conquer everybody or support the allies later on and just blitz through Europe, and that's about it. Like, there's no real goal the U.S. has to work through. Like, Mexico has, you can unite you can unite Central and the Caribbean, and then also fight the rest of South America. Like, it has a goal, and then you fight the U.S. and you can integrate the Spanish cession territories. Like, it has a goal. The U.S. just really doesn't have a goal. It's very passive. In historic, it lets things happen to it, which makes sense. That's kind of what really did happen. But even on its alt histories, like, it's just invade things and demand things, and that's about it. Like, there's no, like, you don't have to do those. Like, that's only if you, like, it's either demand territory from major powers, or fight major powers, pretty much. And there's no reason to. Like, it's not like there's achievement like with Turkey, where you can, if you take the capitals of like multiple of the Severus signatories, you get an achievement. Like, it's pretty much, you fight the majors if you want to, or you don't. So I believe that's going to wrap it up before I keep rambling your guys' ears off. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. This YouTube channel is just getting going, and I'd like to at least push it for a little bit. I'm enjoying making these videos. Lets me get all these thoughts out of my head. And next time we'll be talking about the United Kingdom, which I'm really looking forward to. I really enjoy their tree. And I'll see you guys in the next one.